Welcome to Martin Monday's Intentional Intimacy, where love, life, and legacy meet in the moments that matter most. Every week, I will share sacred reflections of my 30-year marriage before Martin's passing, as well as our life now without him. May these reflections help us live with more weight, warmth, and wisdom. Martin was a letter carrier by profession, but a life carrier by purpose. So let's take a moment and let intentional intimacy speak. Welcome to this edition of Martin Mondays, Intentional Intimacy. This is Martin and the three Kea Sisters. So this should be a funny episode. So there are some stories about Martin that they kind of still make me laugh. They do. And this is actually one of them. Not smile politely, not even remember fondly, but just a straight up laugh for real. And, as I've shared in times past, our families had known each other for a very long time, grew up together. Martin's family and my family were neighbors. Even before I was born, there was this relationship between the Kea family and the Hollis family. And so there was history between us long before there was an us of me and Martin. Okay. And so over the years, I've heard numerous stories from Martin's brothers about my oldest sister. Her name was Linda. Now, apparently, Linda was the neighborhood crush. Everybody liked Linda. Now, Linda was about 12 years older than Martin. And so one day I just decided to ask him, did you have a crush on my sister Linda too? And so that's the kind of question that can make a person kind of be uncomfortable. And so, especially when the woman that's asking the question is your wife's, it's about your wife's sister. Like that makes it a little bit uncomfortable. But Martin took it all in stride. He didn't get embarrassed. He didn't stumble around trying to come up with, some safe possible answer. He just gave me this innocent, almost kind of sophomoric response. And he definitely confirmed with a little shrug of his shoulders that seemed to say, well, everybody in the neighborhood did. That was Martin, right? There wasn't anything behind it, no awkward explanation. Yep, he had a crush on my sister. Well, apparently, so did everyone else. So, all right, we can deal with that. That alone became something that Martin and I could laugh about because it was like, oh, you had a crush on my sister. All right. But then I learned that there was actually more to the story. So several years later, after I confirmed that Martin had a crush on my sister, Linda, several years later, our family, Martin and I are married now, and our family is traveling home from my nephew's funeral in New York. And one of the cars had broken down along the way, so we had to have it towed to a local car dealer, for some repair. And here we are, we're sitting in the waiting room, and everybody's just like tired. It was a hot summer, and it's like, oh my God, we're broken down. We just wanted to get moving. It was just one of those kind of trips, that made you just want to just get home. And so we're sitting here in this dealership, and I'm sitting across from Martin and my sister, my other sister, Myra. They were watching television, and I was reading a book. And so at some point, something happened on the TV show that they were watching, and it must have reminded the two of them of history or a story or whatever, some kind of common union that they had. And so they started laughing. I kind of looked up. All right. I just kind of kept reading my book. Then I heard something about a church bowling event. So they're talking. And apparently Martin and my sister had gone to this bowling event together. So my ears kind of perked up a little bit. I closed my book because there's a story unfolding and I want to get to the bottom of it. Um, and then as I'm listening and I started asking some questions, another story unfolded. Not only had they gone to the bowling event together, they had also gone to dinner together. Now, I wasn't quite as interested in my book anymore because there is together and then there's together. So I needed clarification. I needed somebody to explain it to me. So what exactly, guys, does together mean? Was this two longtime family friends who just so happened to go somewhere at the same time? Or was this a date? I need somebody to clarify. Because those are two very different versions of together. And so the more they talked, the more information started coming out. They had actually gone a few different places together. And Martin would occasionally help my sister with her groceries. He would check on her car, make sure that everything was fine. You know, at that time, my sister, she was a single mom at the time, and Martin was helping her. That was the story. Nothing scandalous, nothing hidden, nothing mysterious. Martin was just simply being Martin, supportive of someone whose family had been connected to him for years. But by then, my brain's kind of churning. You know, I'm still trying to figure this thing out. I'm still trying to understand this togetherness. So then finally, you know, we get home safely. A few days later, my brain is still trying to process this whole togetherness. So I say to Martin one night, babe, let me see if I got this right. You had a crush on my oldest sister, Linda, and you dated my other sister, Myra. So if I had a younger sister, you would be married to her and not me? So Martin, he looks at me and it's kind of like a moment in marriage when your husband realizes that the next thing he says really matters. And so Martin proceeds to give me his answer. He said, babe, I would still be married to you because I got the best Kea sister. Now, that might be true, but there's one little additional piece of fact that should probably be entered into the record here. I am the last Kea sister. So his K options officially ran out with me. Martin and I laughed about that for a long time. And, you know, it was just an opportunity for us to chuckle because I would tease him for years afterwards. And because it just became one of our family stories. It was one of those stories where we all know the truth. We do. But the teasing version is just simply too good to let it go. Right. And so Martin, he would let me have my fun with it. But maybe that's the part of why I still love this memory so much, because at the end of the day, it lets me hear laughter again. It lets me see the shrug in his shoulders when I ask him about my sister, Linda. It lets me imagine his face when he suddenly realized that I had begun to connect the dots, the dots that were really never meant to be connected. Okay. And quite honestly, I can still hear him giving that answer that saved him on that day, because truly he did. He got the best Kea sister. I'll let him keep that answer even though I know that I was the last Kea sister. I'll reflect some more on the other side. So let me reflect. When I first thought about what this story meant, I thought the lesson was about assumptions, about not jumping to conclusions, about understanding context before deciding what something really means. And to be honest, there's truth in that. But the more I sit with this memory now, what stays with me is actually something that's a little bit simpler. And that's this: I knew Martin. I knew the man that was sitting across from me at that car dealer. I knew his heart. I knew that helping my sister with groceries sounded exactly like something Martin would do. Checking on her and her car, again, Martinesque, sounded exactly like him. Being present for a single mom who was also a longtime family friend, all of that sounded just like the Martin that I knew. So I didn't need to invent another version of him because I already knew the man that he was. And to be honest, there's something that's deeply comforting about having known someone that way. Not perfectly, but knowing someone doesn't mean understanding every thought that they ever had or every decision that they ever made. Knowing someone in this sense means that over enough years, over enough ordinary days, and enough conversations, and enough shared experiences, that you begin to recognize the shape of a person's character. You know what sounds like them, and you know what doesn't. You know the difference between something that requires concern and something that deserves a little teasing in a car dealership waiting room, because I knew Martin. And I also knew what we had. So there was room for laughter. There was room for me to raise an eyebrow at the word together. And there was room to accuse him of apparently working his way through the Kea sisters. And there was room for him to sit there and to declare that he got the best one. That laughter was possible because beneath all of it, something settled. And that something is trust. Not the kind of trust that needs to announce itself, just the quiet kind that had been lived and was our experiences. And perhaps that is why this memory feels different to me even now. Because at the time, it was simply funny. It was another story that I could use to tease my husband. Now I can still laugh at it, but I can also see what was underneath the laughter. I had the joy and the privilege of knowing Martin. Not simply knowing facts about him, but knowing him, the person, knowing his generosity and how that made him notice when someone could use some help. Knowing the man who would check on someone's car or help somebody with groceries without needing any attention for doing that. I knew the man who would sit in a dealership waiting room after a difficult family trip and laugh with us. I knew the man who could answer an uncomfortable question about having a childhood crush on my sister with nothing more than a shrug of his shoulders. And knowing the husband who, when finally cornered by this wife, he knew exactly what to say. I got the best Kea sister. There's so many things we know about the people that we love that we don't realize that we know. The little small things, the meaning of a look, the sound of a particular laugh, or what they would order, or what would irritate them, or what would even make them stop and help. What they would find funny, how they would respond when they were teased, how they would move through the ordinary parts of life. And then, when someone is no longer here physically, those small knowing places, they become precious because they remind us of a person we knew, of a life that we shared, how we got to witness who they were when there really was no audience. And sometimes knowing someone that way, that knowing lives inside the funniest of stories. So for today's Martin Monday, my invitation for you is this. I want you to remember one small thing about someone that you love. The kind of thing that could only know of them because you shared life with them. You don't have to turn it into a lesson, but simply remember. That's your assignment. Because I knew Martin. And somewhere in a car dealership waiting room, surrounded by family and laughter, I got another little glimpse of the man that I already knew. A generous friend, a good sport, my husband, and according to him, the man who got the best Kea sister. I still say he got the last one, but I'll let his story live on. So that's what I want you to do this week. Think about someone that you love and think about a memory. Because as Legacy would say, to be deeply known is a gift. And to have deeply known someone is legacy. Thanks so much for sharing this time with me on Martin Mondays. I'll catch you next week. Take care. Martin Mondays continues on Tuesday with the Tuesday Tea. Check it out and join me and take a sip. You know, Martin used to say a lot of things. Some were funny, some were wise, but one thing he often said was, wow. Wow. Just those 3 letters. It spoke volumes. It meant a lot. When he didn't know what to say, wow. When he was excited about something, wow. When he was confused, perhaps, or even frustrated, he said, wow. And you know, he's still saying wow. Through this bracelet, he's still saying wow because he's still saying, may your whole life prove that God is good. And so in closing, that's my hope for you this week. May you have wow moments as you too are living out legacy. Live in the wow. Live in the reality of knowing that your whole life is good. Live in the heartbeat of Martin Mondays and intentional intimacy. May that anchor you in this week as you build legacy, one wow, one moment at a time. See you next week.